Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Pathology, The Everlasting Plague, out November 19th on Nuclear Blast. This album has 12 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 11th full-length studio album. They are an American brutal death metal band. Now, the construction of this album is really interesting because I felt like they brought two different looks, two different designs, and trying to blend them with one another. At first glance, the album feels very compact, very cohesive. It has a sense of a linear motion when you look at how the album opens with A Pound of Flesh. The intro to that song kind of becomes a little bit represented towards the end, towards the outro in Decomposition of Millions. So there's a sense of beginning, a sense of end coming full circle. But then when you start looking deeper into this record, you start to see there's a lot of different things coming at the listener. This is an album that has a lot of layers, so the songs are constructed in that fashion, pulling you in different directions, offering you different soundscapes, different atmospheres, and really allowing the album to have some volatility underneath the overall blanket of brutality that it holds. So really interesting way of constructing an album, picking two different styles, two different approaches, bringing them together in order to create an album that perhaps is a little bit more dynamic than what it appears to be at first glance. Once you get into the soundscape, this is a very rich album. It has a lot of sound, it has a lot of volume, it has a lot of brutality. When you get to the end of the record, you feel like you've been pounded. It's just a heavy, brutal album. But that's not just all that it has to offer. As you dive deeper into the sound, as you dive deeper into the album itself, you start to see a lot of variables happening that make this album a little bit chaotic at times, that move the sound, that move the experience that these tracks have from song to song, almost allowing you to reset yourself at every single track, because the experience, while similar, is going to be slightly different from song to song. So there's a lot of speed bumps along the way. Within that soundscape, I really felt that there were two cornerstones, the drums and the guitars, doing two very different things, working perhaps in parallel with one another in terms of what they're giving to the album, but definitely offering the record different nuances. When you look at the drums, for example, very controlled from beginning to end. They create a little bit of the roadmap, the foundation of this album, and while changing ever so slightly depending on the overall brutality of the song, the execution and how they're coming together, it's always pretty much the same across every single song. So it's one of the few elements that this record has that really stays compact, or at least it stays very well defined from beginning to end, really helping the listener find its path throughout all the chaos that's happening within the record. Then you have the guitars. The guitars are the chaos of this album. They really pull you and they really stretch the footprint of this record itself. It's not just a brutal sounding album as far as the guitars go. They also give you technical elements. They also give you melodic elements. They bring in some traditional death metal, thrash metal sounds, riffs into the mix. So there's a lot for the listener to process just by looking at what the guitars are doing, really becoming the motor, really becoming the heartbeat of every single track. So if you look at this album has three well-defined layers. At the bottom, you have the drums that are creating that foundation, that roadmap, that road that allows then the guitars to come on top of it and be the driver, be the car that travels across that road, not always moving in the same direction, not always moving at the same speed with the same intent, but it's traveling. That inside that car, driving the experience, creating some weight, some substance, are the vocals. Obi drives a lot of brutality through his voice into this record. He's super consistent from beginning all the way to the end. There's no variations, there's no changes. What you get with the first song is exactly what you're going to get all the way through. So you have two elements that offer consistency from beginning to end, which is vocals and drums, and then in the middle you have the chaos provided, perhaps the controlled chaos provided by the guitars and everything that they have to offer across a lot of different parameters within the death metal spectrum. Overall, this is a very powerful record from that perspective, and I think the best thing to say about this album, at least from my perspective, is the divide that exists between the vocals and the soundscape. This is a record that you have the ability to see where both are on every single track. You can understand what's happening musically by dissecting all the different elements that the sound carries, and then you can see the vocals and the brutality that they create on the other side. You could get the full picture, but you could also see all the different pieces that went into creating that puzzle. I really enjoyed that aspect because my mind allowed itself to travel into the sound that was created and at the same time bring along for the ride the brutality of the vocals. I can see some people not enjoying necessarily this path. They may want something a little bit more muddied, where the vocals, the brutality of the vocals blends in a little bit better with the overall melody and brutality of the sound, and everything starts to become a little bit one, and perhaps a little bit harder to define the parameters between one and the other, because that would overall hit the album harder, would make the album more brutal all around. It would make the record also more consistent all around. But the issue that I have with that is that it would become really hard to see the forest from the trees on an album like that. It would become a little bit overbearing at times, and perhaps by the end of the album you would look back and no song would stand out because everything would kind of feel the same. Having the album designed this way perhaps feels a little bit more choppy, it feels a little bit more broken, but it's better for the listener, at least for me. It was better for me to understand what the album was all about and to be able to enjoy all the different pieces that made this puzzle. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with A Pound of Flesh. Opening track, I love the intro. I love it for two reasons. It's a great intro for the song, and a great intro for the album itself. A song that has a roller coaster ride vibe, specifically musically, because vocally is very steady all the way through. But musically, the guitars really pull you up and down. They really create the ebbs and flows that this track has, and it's all about the melody and brutality and how the guitars navigate between those two worlds. Those are really the ebbs and flows that this song has to offer, because the drums are consistent, the vocals are consistent, and everything in between is what's really oscillating and creating the movement, the dynamic movements that this song has built in within it. I love the fact that it tries to bring together melody and aggression, bring these two worlds in a nice way, in a smooth way, with the right elements at the right time coming together in order to provide a song that has a lot of substance, a lot of volume. Next you have Diseased Morality, a more methodic track. When you look at A Pound of Flesh, it's a song that hits you immediately. Once you get over that intro, it hits you immediately, it stays with you, very aggressive, very much in your face. Diseased Morality is a little bit more of a step back, has more of a methodic movement. It's still heavy, it's very compact, both musically and vocally working really well together. The drums pound you to the ground while the guitars then drive on top of you. That's kind of how this song is put together. This is really how this song feels. The solo is outstanding. I was not expecting a solo like this on a track that has this sort of more melancholic feel, but it fit like a glove, was absolutely perfect. It let a little bit of the light into the overall darkness that this track holds. Not that necessarily is a dark track, but it just has some heaviness, and in that methodic motion that the song has, it does carry a little bit of darkness with it. I love how it's constructed. The solo really nails it and makes this one of those exceptional tracks that you will remember because of that specific element, that specific solo. Last but not least, Dirge for the Infected, sorry. More methodic opening track, and then it starts to quickly evolve, it starts to move, it starts to morph, and it becomes a song that has more of a technical drive, more of a forward motion. So it's a track that almost merges the two previous songs that I mentioned. It has a little bit of both of them incorporated into one single track. The guitars push the experience, they push this song forward, they create the motion that the track has, while the drums and vocals offer some consistent from top to bottom as far as heaviness and brutality is concerned. Still a very dynamic track, a track that accelerates, slows down, accelerates, slows down. Like I said, bringing Pound of Flesh and Diseased Morality together as one. The elements that we saw being really prevalent in each of those songs are binded together, they're combined together as one in this Dirge for the Infected. This is it. Pathology, The Everlasting Plague, out November 19th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.